That's okay that you didn't hear me because I was fumbling with my words anyway. So hello, welcome. Welcome to a nice special stream in honor of the last week of October. It's a very October stream as we were talking about the classic Hanna-Barbera cartoon Scooby-Doo. So hopefully you can hear me all right. Let's see. Now the prof says, and I'm going to welcome the chat here, but the prof asks, is the thumbnail not visible for anyone else? Yeah, I had it with that awful gray thumbnail. I wish they had a cleaner looking thumbnail. Let me just adjust the mic just a little bit better. Can you guys hear me okay? That's a little rough start to my stream. Yeah, that's weird. So no thumbnail. So on my phone and on my iPad, there was the thumbnail was visible, but on my computer, my main computer, there was no thumbnail. But whatever, it's not a big deal. Actually, to be honest, I couldn't find a really good thumbnail anyway. So it'll probably appear after the stream. But it was really, it took me a good hour to find a good Scooby-Doo Where Are You thumbnail. But no big deal. Not a big deal. So, yeah, that's maybe that's just YouTube being picky today, but or it could be the storms. It could be the stormy weather, which I'm kind of glad it's a little bit of a stormy weather today because it commences the October, or the last week of October, as I said, the autumnal feeling of that just great feeling of the season. Anyway, let's welcome the chat, and as I sort my thoughts together, I feel discombobulated for some reason, even though I prepared for this stream, and I even prepped the stream actually, to be honest, about 20 minutes ago, I was finishing the second episode of Scooby-Doo. I was actually watching Scooby-Doo before the stream, so I feel good because I forgot how awesome that cartoon is. So anyway, just want to welcome Daniel, who's probably not here. He's way pumped about this, or pumped for this, but he isn't feeling well. So I really hope he's feeling well within the next day or so. Horizon Talker saying ruh-roh. They're talking about music. Let's see if I can do Scooby. They're talking about music, Raggy. If we can count on you, Scooby-Doo. Oh, if we can count on you, Scooby-Doo. Oh, I can't sing that low because that's a man singing. If we can count on you, Scooby-Doo, I know we'll catch that feeling. Da, da, da. I'm ready for my very own Daphne Blank to show up on screen. Yeah, Prof was really sweet. I don't know if it's entirely true, but when I was a girl, I wanted the Hanna-Barbera figure, and he once complimented a couple times. He's complimented that I may have that Hanna-Barbera figure. So happy that he says that, of course. And Zetopia is in the house. Good to see you, Zetopia. Hi, everyone. Hi, Zetopia. And Gigawatt as well. So hopefully everyone's having a good day. Everyone's having a good start to the week. And I think I'll be able to see my notes just a little bit. Just kind of a casual conversation on the music score of Scooby-Doo. Now, there have been many versions over the past 40, 50 years of Scooby-Doo. I'm just focused solely on the original version that was released in 1969. And this also just includes the musical cues. It doesn't really include the songs. It actually really doesn't even include the theme song, even though the theme song is really quite popular. Everyone knows it. It's kind of like if you grew up with Scooby-Doo, you kind of think of it as it could be compared to something like The Prince of Bel-Air. You just know the song and how the words go, and it's a great catchy melody. It's really emphasizing that wonderful 60s rock instrumentation with that kind of high tenor quality of the male singer, with your electric guitar, your electric bass, and everything that goes into that traditional 60s rock band. It's quite wonderful. It adds that fun comedic vibe to the story. I think originally Ken Spears, who's the creator of Scooby-Doo, I think he originally wanted a little bit more horror or seriousness to the cartoon, but because not Hanna-Barbera, I think it was CBS, they needed something lighthearted for that setting, because you know, it was a time when Scooby-Doo was released. This was happening just during or a little bit after things like the Vietnam War. There was a lot of Hanna-Barbera was really into displaying, illustrating through cartoons, good versus evil, like the original superhero cartoons, and a lot of that space fantasy, maybe we see with Space Ghost, and CBS was actually strict on them at first, saying, no, we can't have horror, we can't have this cartoon that was actually based off the Archie's Gang, the band. We can't have them too serious. We can't have it too scary. So they really did lighten up the mood. I think that the beginning stages of Scooby-Doo, it wasn't even called Scooby-Doo. The dog was not even supposed to be called Scooby-Doo. But it was supposed to, it just went through iteration after iteration, starting with kind of it being heavily inspired by Archie. And that gang of that kind of setting. Is it Riverdale High School? It's not Rivendell. That's Lord of the Rings. My prof knows Archie and all the characters much more than I do, but I'm sure I'll be well versed in that in no time. So I do like the main theme song of Scooby-Doo. It's really it's just got that upbeat magic vibe. But we actually are going to be talking about the music soundtrack. And I think I see the professor. Yeah, Riverdale. Yeah. I knew it started with R, and I knew it ended with Dale. So anyway, so without further ado, we'll just get started. Just some notes before I start. I did include the link. Hopefully you guys see that link in the chat where it's actually a really nice compilation of the original tracks and the names of those tracks. It's not, I don't think it's everything. I don't think everything is included in that playlist in terms of the musical cues of the different episodes, but it definitely is enough. It's pretty comprehensive, and it's pretty much the whole thing of the music soundtrack. So we'll just go ahead and get started. After I grab a swig of water. So the Scooby-Doo soundtrack, this was pretty much brought to us, or the American public, by a man by the name of Ted Nichols. He has a longer name. I actually didn't really refer to his longer name when I was researching. And in the credits of the original cartoon, he's stationed or positioned as music director. And that can mean a number of things. Music director doesn't always mean music composer. It could be someone gathering music from established composers, maybe some public domain tracks, maybe some music and sound, and then putting it all together to put musical cues in a film sequence. And so at first I thought that was his position. Maybe the music was just all this public domain musical cues that had been archived, but maybe never used in a cartoon or a film or a TV setting. But actually, I dug a little deeper, and Ted Nichols is a composer and arranger. He also worked with Hanna-Barbera for Space Ghost, Josie and the Pussycats, a little bit of Johnny Quest, I think a little bit of Flintstones as well. So he was pretty much a pretty important figure in the way of music. So Ted Nichols, I'll just go ahead and write that in the chat. So it is nice to know that Scooby-Doo, the original Scooby-Doo, does have an actual composer behind the scenes. And as I was listening to the soundtrack, I'm thinking, man, that just must have been a really fun time. Yeah, I know the 60s was, it had some political assassinations going on, threat of nuclear war, you get the Vietnam War, just a lot of upheaval happening in the 1960s. We also, were trying to go to the moon there, and we did. But at the same time, it's like, I kind of, if I could travel back in time, I would definitely visit the 60s and 70s. In terms of film production, it's just, I don't know. It just seemed like a nice time. But maybe that's just from watching, the documentaries and stuff like that. But yeah, there's a little bit of magic in something like the Scooby-Doo franchise, especially with the original version. And I think the music plays heavily into that. The music plays heavily into not just the mysteriousness and the sleuth-like, detective-like vibe, but it's also the comedy. There's a lot of musical cues in a 22-minute episode of Scooby-Doo where it's just really funny. You're supposed to laugh with the actions and the exchange and the dialogue between the characters and that slapstick comedy. And the music, those musical cues really do help with that. So if you would, on your own time, if you're interested, I would just, take a listen to that playlist. I pretty much have that soundtrack memorized because I grew up with Scooby-Doo. And you guys might too. It might be embedded in your consciousness. Yeah, I really do appreciate the music score. So Ted Nichols is the music director, as said in the credits, but he's also a known composer, an American composer. And that's actually pretty important, as I might just bring it to the table now before going through my notes. The idea of Hanna-Barbera being a collaboration with American artists, and why I bring up American composer is because Ted Nichols, I am pretty much 100% sure. I will say 98% sure. He drew a lot of musical inspiration, for the Scooby-Doo soundtrack. He drew in a lot of musical inspiration from some of film noir, which makes sense because film noir has a little bit of mystery, maybe not strictly the detective archetype, but it definitely has much of that element there. And so film noir and a little bit of Universal monsters. Not every film noir film soundtrack has what you hear in Scooby-Doo. Some of film noir has very cinematic kind of opera style music, and that kind of old movie feel of the 1920s and 30s. It's really supposed to be more dramatic and more emotional and lush and warm and riveting. A lot of film noir has that. Out of the Past had that. The Big Sleep also had that, and I'm getting the composers mixed up. Max Steiner's is what I'm thinking of. But Double Indemnity, I'll just go ahead and look at my list. Double Indemnity, if I can say that word right, Indemnity. I wish I could say this right on my live stream. That definitely had some cues by some of the music is lush and romantic, but some of it is really much of that kind of sneaking around as the plot conveys. And so it's kind of that sleuth-like vibe, even though that movie isn't about, a detective. It's really about people sneaking around trying to cover up their nefarious acts. But that idea of sneaking around, the snooping, and there is investigation going on as well. So the anti-heroes in that film, they're avoiding investigation. They're avoiding what the protagonist is doing. But Miklos Rosa, who is Hungarian at first, but he is also known as an American composer as well. He had much of that mysterious intrigue of investigation, of beguilement, of clandestine atmospheric ideas. So some of film noir some of those films. In fact, actually, I'll just go ahead and read the list that I do have. Film noir, like Sunset Boulevard, the soundtrack for that is, I can hear some of that influence play into the Scooby-Doo soundtrack. Also, Murder My Sweet, which was composed by Roy Webb and released in 1944. Double Indemnity is also 1944, which is pretty fascinating. But more than film noir, I was listening to Laura soundtrack. I was listening to Maltese Falcon. Not quite as some of the others. So it's not strictly film noir. What is also greatly inspirational for this kind of music for Scooby-Doo is actually Universal Monsters. So again, as it is with film noir, it's not every single Universal Monster soundtrack, but the main soundtracks that I did pick up that do kind of sound like Scooby-Doo of the 1960s is films like Bride of Frankenstein, by Franz Waxman, who was also the composer for Sunset Boulevard, Creature from the Black Lagoon by Hans Salter, and then also Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein, or they meet Frankenstein, 1948, by a man called Frank Skinner. So that's kind of the combination of film noir and Universal Monsters that I was picking. I was like, oh yeah, I could see the musical cues and influence happening over in Scooby-Doo. And it kind of makes sense. With film noir, you've got the investigation, detective, super sleuth idea. And then obviously with the Universal Monsters, it's that horror. That's that classic horror that they were going for with the original episodes. Like with characters like Frankenstein and the Wolfman and Jekyll and Hyde and all of those characters. So I would say that Ted Nichols, I would bet a pretty penny that he was greatly inspired by these soundtracks. It would make total sense, not just because of the topics that I just described, but also, this was released in 1969, so much of the music has been composed really only 20, 30 years after all of these great classics were released themselves. So that's something to consider. That's something to factor in the Scooby-Doo soundtrack, is that it was heavily influenced by, American stylistic writing, composition writing, of the film, like of film noir and of the Universal Monsters. So that is something to consider of the Scooby-Doo soundtrack. Now, I actually don't have too much to say in the way of composition for the Scooby-Doo soundtrack. I will say a couple important things. The first is Scooby-Doo, the track is built around a very, very, very specific motive. It's really an interval. It's an interval that is known as the tritone. This could be a raised fourth or a diminished fifth, but a tritone in music theory, in harmony, is the most dissonant, the most unsettling intervallic relationship between two notes. So, for instance, a fifth is a very consonant interval. I actually don't have my keyboard, unfortunately, for you to hear. I'm not streamed through OBS, but I'll just go ahead and hum the perfect fifth. Da dum bum bum. Very consonant. It will take you to something primitive, something epic feeling. When you're thinking of King Arthur or knighthood or Lord of the Rings, and it doesn't have to be strictly medieval. It could be something out of Marvel, something heroic. You have a consonant interval like the fifth. Dun, dun. You can do fourth. Dun, dun. Da, 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 da. So the fifth, the fourth. Now, the raised fourth or the diminished fifth, the lowered fifth, is in between the fifth and fourth. Da, da. And it is exactly 6 semitones apart from the original tonic. The scale the chromatic scale is a series of 12 steps, and 6 steps until you start inverting it back to 12 is the farthest interval in the farthest space between, let's say we start with C. Yeah, that is C. C to F sharp, going back, going up to C. So you have C, and then the octave C, and then the F sharp smacked right in the middle, or G flat, depending on what you like. That's the farthest distance from C you can go before the 6 inverts back to the higher octave. Really abstract to say. Word for word, it's definitely easier to see in a diagram or in a set of numbers. But the tritone, if you just take my word for it as a music professional, the tritone is the farthest interval, the distance from the original low pitch. Dum. So we've got, if I start with C, da da, C to C sharp, that's one semitone. Da 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 da, that's a major third. Da da, major fourth or perfect fourth. Da da, and then once you reach to that, then you take that F sharp, and then like, oh, okay, well, if I go to G, da da, well, now I'm still closest. I'm still closer to the higher octave C. So what's the whole point of that? Well, the farther you go from that original pitch, the I would say the propensity is to be more dissonant. So the tritone is the dissonant chord. Dissonance is really, in a nutshell, is I would say is musical tension. So you have consonants, something that sounds wholesome, that sounds beautiful. Da 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 da. Be really easy to it'd be easier to grasp at the keyboard playing them together, but I can only do melodic intervallic relationships because I can't sing 2 pitches at the same time. So where was it going with that? So yeah, so dissonance and consonants. Consonants is beauty and openness and a sense of resolution in the diatonic scale. Dissonance is tension, musical tension. It needs to resolve to something else. So that F sharp, that raised fourth, da, da, needs to raise to the fifth. Traditional harmony, as we're speaking it, that it's kind of shaking in place, wanting to resolve, either wanting to resolve up if it's F sharp to G, or if it was G flat, it would resolve down to F to a perfect fourth. So up to a perfect fifth, or down a perfect fourth, down to something that is consonant. Down to something that is a consonant interval. So what's the point of dissonance? Well, it creates tension, and it can also create something unsettling, something mysterious, something that's not resolved, as in the way of Scooby-Doo, it's a mystery. So it has to have that sense of tension and not quite solving that mystery yet, not until the very end. You can go from like a bassoon or a trombone to something like the oboe or a playful violin. So there's this kind of, it's not cacophony, it's not disorder, but it is kind of, it's musical tension from one scene to the next dialogue, to the next scene, to the next action sequence, and really the calm, resolving diatonic relationship that feels centered and it feels finished does not happen until the mask of the villain is lifted. I find that pretty fascinating. So talking about this tritone, da, da, it's you could call it a raised fourth or a diminished fifth, and that is the main interval playing all throughout Scooby-Doo, all throughout the episode. Now, actually, I'm going to probably sing it in the key that I have, but the motive for this main episode, or really the original Scooby-Doo series, has, I'll just go ahead and sing it. Bum 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 da 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 da. Bum 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 da 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 da. Dum 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 bum, dun, dun, da, 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 da. Now, that still is a tritone relationship. It's higher, because it's in F. I was singing in the key of C earlier with my examples, but now it's in F minor. And that's the motive. Bum, bum, bum. Now, actually, the thing is, I sang the theme. I'm going to be totally honest, though. I can't find the theme anywhere. The only reason why I sang the theme as it was is the Scooby-Doo mystery game of Super Nintendo that I had just finished last week. The title screen of the game has that as the theme. But you don't really hear it in the episode because it's found in the title card. And the title card of a cartoon episode, like a 20-minute cartoon episode, has to be like 10 seconds, no more than 15 seconds. So really, the title card music is, when you see the kids running and it looks spooky, or maybe you see like a still shot of the villain and then the title of the episode is showing. It's really only bum, 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 ba, da, 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 like that. And that's it. So the theme, I think, is played somewhere. I just couldn't really find it. And I haven't heard it really in its full length besides the game in Super Nintendo, which I kind of find fascinating. So I actually won't say Scooby-Doo theme. We can kind of refer the theme as the theme song as we hear. So the motive, the musical motive, is this kind of F-centered chord with F, C, da, C, 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 F, B. So F, B is the tritone. Why is that important? Well, it's pretty much played in multiple music cues, multiple musical cues throughout the different episodes. And actually, you would hear that in the playlist that I had provided. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the scores, the different pieces as presented by this playlist. The scores that really share this musical motive. So eerie starts kind of really slow. It has kind of eerie. When you think of eerie, you kind of think of high strings kind of shimmering and with that little light tremolo, and it's supposed to, it's supposed to sound kind of ghost-like and mysterious and all that good stuff. And then the musical motive kind of has that really kind of a slow beat, boom, boom, da, like that, with a little bit of electric organ, which is great. Electric organ is part of that old rock, 60s rock instrumentation. And so that's eerie. That's what the track is called. Next is Something Stirring, which is a slow jazz riff of that musical motive. It's really similar to something you would hear of Henry Mancini, whether it's the short Pink Panther cartoons or even a music soundtrack from that movie Charades with Henry Mancini. It has that jazz riff that's supposed to be, I got to solve this mystery. And actually, it kind of makes sense because the original Pink Panther film, didn't really care for the film myself, but it does involve an investigator, as he's kind of a bumbling protagonist, which kind of is the inspiration for the inspector character who tries to get Pink Panther in the short cartoons. But yeah, so that second track, Something Stirring, is using the same musical motive, da, 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 but with kind of a drum riff that is found in a slow jazz combo number. And actually, I pointed this out. I'm glad I wrote this down. But the song, "Oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling Clementine," is actually inserted in this kind of mysterious sleuth-like piece. But I think Clementine is actually in minor. So I just sang in major. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. This is minor. Da 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 da. And I think the instrument used for that is like a plucked electric guitar or electric bass, but it has that like a wah-wah filter, just a little bit of wah-wah chorusing filter, which again, was really popular of the 1960s rock instrumentation. So it's pretty interesting. And even more interesting is Huckleberry Hound was the protagonist. I didn't really see much of his episodes, but he, when he goes from one place to another, his shtick is to sing "Oh my darling Clementine." He never sings the whole song, but he'll just kind of whistle or actually sing out loud that. Interestingly enough, I think Ted Nichols, who composes for Scooby-Doo, the original series, also did a little bit of Huckleberry Hound as well. If not, he's still a Hanna-Barbera cartoon character, so I think it's kind of nice that you're kind of tying in. There's not congruence, kind of a contingency between all the Hanna-Barbera cartoon characters. So that's Something Stirring. What's really nice about this one is the muted brass instruments. So trumpets that have a mute on, or trombones. Trumpets, trombones. French horns are actually considered wind instruments, and they're not really typical of big band or jazz band. They could be found, but it's not that typical. I should check my audio. Okay. Anyway, so it's just I keep talking. I'm like, you guys can still hear me, right? But going back to brass instruments, it's quite an effect of film noir to have the brass instruments like the trumpet and the trombone muted. It's actually a jazz effect, really. Very, very common for that tinny, kind of nasally sound leaking through the trumpet or the trombone. Very, very popular for spy music, for super sleuth music, for that detective kind of feel, but also just in film noir in general, even if it doesn't have that detective archetype. Very, very common effect of film noir, and it was very much common in this track, Something Stirring. So with Something Stirring, you've got the musical motive, you've got it in a slow jazz riff, you've got things like Clementine inserted in the minor, and then you've got some kind of not really random, but it's supposed to have that unsettling. Okay, now we're going to insert some muted brass instruments again. That kind of old super sleuth. I say super sleuth. That old sleuth atmospheric musical effect. So that is Something Stirring. The track Snooping Around, it's a separate track, but it's really just an extension of the motive and also the extension of Something Stirring. Next is Jinkies, which is Velma's phrase when she's surprised, when she expresses surprise. And Jinkies is pretty upbeat, also sharing this musical motive. Dum, dum, dum. And then Jeepers, which is an expression of Daphne, has a little bit more involved. Now, I don't know if it was actually Daphne's theme or Velma's theme. It's just what they express when they're shocked or surprised. But with Jeepers, with Daphne's expression, it's actually rock instrumentation, whereas other tracks were dealing more with the traditional orchestra, or at least orchestra samples. Now, I found this interesting because, with rock instrumentation, that kind of makes sense more for Daphne, because you'll see her dancing with Fred if they're listening to music. Sometimes Velma would dance. I've seen Velma dance once, but no, I've seen them dance a couple times. Shaggy dancing too. But when I think of rock, I actually do think more of Fred and Daphne dancing. So I thought that was appropriate. I don't know if that was intentional by Mr. Nichols, but I found that kind of a coincidence, right? The next track, Searching for Clues, is reverting back to the slow tempo. I think slow tempo is really important between scenes, with them arriving at the scene, or maybe arriving at a very mysterious place like a graveyard or closed museum or something like that, where it has to be slow. It has to be sparse in texture. It has to be quiet, because these are, I think Scooby-Doo and the gang are protagonists, but they kind of do illegal stuff, guys. Like, you're not supposed to break into a museum at night. You just can't. Even if you're trying to solve a mystery, you can't do that. That's not good. But they have to sneak around. They're sneaking around at night. So a slow tempo with sparse texture makes more sense. So that's searching for clues. Something with searching for clues also, the main melody, bum bum bum, da 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 da. It actually drops down a sixth from F minor rather, to A minor. So it's definitely lower, and so you've got that raised fourth with the D sharp, or lower fifth with the E flat. Same pitch, but it just depends on how the composer has written that in. Creepers is a track that uses that same intervallic motive, except with sound effects that whoever was in charge of sound, I didn't catch the name in the title credits, and it could have been Ted Nichols himself. But there's this little like this kind of sine tone. It's actually, is it a sine tone? It's controlled by another sine tone ramping up from a low frequency to a high frequency. So it has a woo, 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 woo. And I can't really, it's supposed to be a ghost effect, it's supposed to be creepy, like a ghost is, sneaking up behind you. And so the creepers is more like sound effects, like brush sticks or brushes for like a snare. So it has kind of a feathery, sound playing at your ears, and then kind of this controlled sine tone, this oscillation going up in frequency in two ways. The oscillation moving this way, and then the oscillation ramping up from a low frequency to a high frequency. So I love that sound effect. It's so endearing. It's so charming. It has that kind of corny ghost sound. And then also grounds of mystery. So those are the tracks that really continue working with that motive. Not ad nauseum, but there's a lot of repetition with this intervallic motive of Scooby-Doo. Now, real quick, I don't have many notes to go much longer, but there are scene fillers as well. So I'm just going to relay the snacks. That's one of the scene fillers. I'm going to relay the track sounds, or the track titles rather, and then kind of cushion it with some feedback. Scooby Snacks is one. I think Scooby Snacks, I think it's dum da dun da da dun da dun dun da dun da da. I can't sing it right now because it's a bassoon and it's supposed to be really low, and my brain is kind of processing how low it's dropping. But Scooby Snacks is in major. It's kind of quirky. It's kind of either him getting the Scooby snack, or actually sometimes it starts the episode where the gang is hanging out and just having fun. It's supposed to be a happy, cheerful juxtaposition to the otherwise eerie creepiness of the soundtrack. And then following Scooby Snacks is actually snacking. So it's usually when maybe they arrive on a scene, or maybe they're in a location where Shaggy and Scooby want to, scout out for some food. So that soundtrack goes into, it's supposed to be happy, but happy and quirky. It's not, as CBS wanted, they wanted something really lighthearted for their children's television broadcast. So it had to have a lot of light, upbeat tones for that element of horror and mystery as well. So Scooby Snacks is a lighthearted one. It's in major. Snacking is also in major. Another one, I don't have this in order on my list, but pandering. I was like, what was pandering? And I was thinking back when I was listening to it. I was like, oh, yeah, it's actually when Scooby's trying to thwart the monster, having the monster think he's someone else. So he does a little bit of role play. And then it's not just thwarting the monster, like fooling him or trying to fool the monster, but it's actually to put the monster in a predicament which would slow the monster down from reaching him or Shaggy or the rest of the gang. So it's supposed to be quirky and happy as well. And I remember that. I was like, oh, pandering. Yeah, you're trying to butter up the monster and then put the monster in a predicament so you can escape. So that was pretty interesting. A couple couple ones, a couple pieces that I like that are a little bit different. Puzzling investigation, which is more of kind of like a um, it's March like. You're in a position where you're talking to the authorities. So the kids are talking to an adult figure. It could be the police officer, it could be a detective, it could be a sheriff, um, it could be a homeowner, someone who is more in place of the authority of the location or of the predicament. It's got like a promenade feel, like you're welcoming in a certain authority. So it has a very different tone. It's major, it's warmer in tone. It's kind of it's pulling you out of the paranormal element and kind of placing you into reality of figures of authority. And that also happens actually with one of my favorite parts of the soundtrack, and that's Meddling Kids, where it goes dun 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 da 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 dun dun dun. It's just like a nice kind of march-like tone, like the kids earn their victory through their illegal means to solve the mystery. And then the sheriff awards them, or they get awarded somehow, or they go to the malt shop and get some drinks. So Meddling Kids and Puzzling Investigation are two tracks that are fillers, for scenes that are very away, that branch out from the paranormal and the mysterious and go to the sunshiny part of that kind of world. Casual Sleuthing is Western style, so there are some Western elements of Scooby-Doo. I think there's Minor 49er. That's got a little bit of a Western saloon flair. There are some other episodes that I can't remember off the top of my head that have that kind of saloon style, where maybe Scooby is dressing up as a cowboy or a Lone Ranger or something like that. And then a couple of my favorites are Danger and Chasing. Danger. The track Danger is very aleatoric in sequence. It's not really supposed to make a lot of musical sense narratively, but things are happening so fast where in the scene there is a threat. There's something at stake, really usually involving Shaggy and Scooby, and they have to either solve a problem, get out of a situation, or something is coming. It's usually the fact that the monster is coming or the monster is nearby, and I really do appreciate that danger sequence. Actually, the danger sequence is in the Super Nintendo mystery, where it's the second mystery where you are at a carnival and you're trying to capture this ghostly clown, and so it's it's definitely I just have a soft spot for it, probably because of the Super Nintendo game that I grew up with. But it's great, even though it sounds random. It just works so well. Chasing is probably one of my favorites. I can't do it justice singing, but you can always refer to the playlist. It is really the most. It's the sequence that's the most often used because either Shaggy and Scooby are running for the monster. They usually run into the monster more frequently than the other kids. But sometimes it's the whole gang running, and it's that sequence that always plays, and that's when the stakes are highest, when the monster is chasing them. And so I really do appreciate that one. And then Traps is kind of like where Freddy, the leader of the gang, sets the traps. He when you hear the music, it's the motive bum bum bum, but used in a major way, so a major intervallic way. I can't think of off the top of my head. Bum bum bum. I don't think it's that. But I do remember being that intervallic relationship in the inverse where it's actually the major diatonic relationship, and that makes sense because Freddy's the leader, and the traps never really work. That's the whole play of the episode, where his original traps don't work because something happens where Scooby's in the way. He fumbles the trap, but it ends up working anyway because it's a MacGuffin. No, it's not MacGuffin. It's a is that what it's called? No, I think MacGuffin is more of an item. But anyway, Scooby bumbles into the trap and somehow it all works out in the end because that's what has to happen in a 20-minute cartoon. So I do appreciate that one as well. And then I also have Arriving at the Scene, which is supposed to be a little bit slow and creepy, and Oh Susanna. So da da da. Oh wait, no, that's Oh My Darling. Yeah. Da 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 da. Oh Susanna, don't you cry for me, like that. But the verse of that song is actually in the minor. Da 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 da. And it's really cool because I think that's also plucked with the electric guitar with kind of a chorus effect. It's really got a good ambience to it. So Arriving at the Scene is supposed to be very slow. It's supposed to be very sparse in texture, and it has kind of a minor melody, a minor version of Oh Susanna. I do like that the composer incorporates these very popular tunes, but switches it around where it's from major to minor, which makes sense because it's usually in a dark place or it's at night. You know, it's supposed to bring the mood down into something mysterious. But that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about with the music. And then I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe we can go ahead and bounce ideas around what that score means to you, what the music of Scooby-Doo means to you. All right. Well, that's interesting. Stream is cutting out all of a sudden. That could be the storm. So hopefully you guys are back. That was about 20 minutes ago. I had to refresh. Crazy weather, it seems. Oh, hey there, Engraver. Hey, Wolf10. Actually, did I welcome the chat? We've got Furry Old Dog, Good Vibes. We've got Wolf10. And we've got Team Ghost Planet 3.0. And Professor Geek says, from Scooby-Doo to Huckleberry Hound. Which, yeah, both Hanna-Barbera characters. No, this is very different. Different production team, Wolfton. All right. Let's see. We've got Cedras. Is that how you pronounce your name? Moss, hello. Red herring. You'll have to explain that. Oh, maybe it's the weather, if you're talking about that. Oh, good. Well, I'm glad. So maybe I'll do this as a separate video too, as something. I don't know. We'll see. So yeah, it could be the storms for sure. But yeah, that's all I had to say, guys. If you wanted to bring it to the table, if not, I'll probably wrap it around. Probably within the hour. We're on minute 50. So in about 10 minutes, if I don't see too much going on in the chat, we'll just go ahead and wrap it up. So what I would like to also point out is a lot of random musical cues, you know, that don't really flow as a traditional musical narrative in Scooby-Doo. But that's okay with all the thematic ideas that I've talked about before. But also, I think with something like the original series of Scooby-Doo, the Hanna-Barbera, where it's a lot of beautiful background settings, but little motion involving the characters. You know, we see them walk, we see them run, we see them, you know, move their mouths, and maybe we see them lift their arms as a form of expression or something like that. But, you know, back then, of course, the animation is really limited. And because of that, I think you can afford a very active musical score. Usually I'm not like that. You know, usually when there is a lot of visual things going on in a film, the music has to take a back seat. It could still be fine composition And in fact, it should be. It shouldn't be boring. It shouldn't be generic. It shouldn't be strictly atmospheric. But music is secondary. But I think with something like Scooby-Doo, where back in the 1960s and early 70s, where you really did have that limited animation and kind of the stock, animation or revisiting the same animated motion, as we obviously see with Hanna-Barbera. We've seen also with the earlier Disney classic films there, like Dalmatians and King Arthur and stuff like that. I would say it's fine to have a pretty active score. And again, that active, really active score brings out the comedy, especially with Shaggy and Scooby. It was actually presented, whether it was the executives of CBS, I'm not sure, or Hanna-Barbera themselves, or maybe it was Ken Spears, but they actually, in the slow development of conceptualizing the cartoon Scooby-Doo, they started realizing to add levity and laughter to something scary, especially on Saturday morning. They really started seeing Shaggy and Scooby as Abbott and Costello. They started seeing them as the comedy duo, and the musical score really works well with those two characters. It works with the whole idea of the whole gang, but as far as comedic relief and slapstick and dialogue, banters, and all that, and crashing into things, the musical cue really works for the characters, Shaggy and Scooby. My prof has something generous to say. Not knowing the technical aspect of the music, the score of Scooby-Doo always signaled fun for me as a kid. I always loved the addition of guitar, bass, drums, which made it more interesting for me. The interesting thing, about Scooby-Doo is it is the orchestra, like you would hear in a film noir soundtrack or Universal Monster soundtrack, but it also uses that 60s rock instrumentation too. Not just with the songs, so sometimes sometimes there'll be a monster montage, chasing the gang, and then you'd have like the song 7 Days Awake Now. I love that song. So you'll have some of the pop songs inserted in the montage of chasing. But then you also use, electric bass, electric guitar, electric organ, which is really popular in the 60s and 70s. So I really like that mix too. And it works kind of not synthesis, but just a nice blend where you don't really hear the distinction between the orchestral music and the rock instruments as well. All right, there's something I don't know about. Red herring? For the record, it was not me. Sadra says, does anyone notice the change in modern versions of the show regarding the music? Actually, probably. Cedrus, I hope I'm saying your name right. Cedrus or Cedrus. I didn't look at the other evolution, the evolution of Scooby-Doo. I watched the shows that I did watch as a kid was the original Hanna-Barbera series. I did watch the Scooby-Doo show, which was a little bit later. I think the Scooby-Doo show introduced Scooby-Doo's cousin, Scooby-Dum, and I really enjoyed that show. I really liked that show. I don't know the soundtrack though, so it could very well be the same. It'd be interesting actually to hear how it's evolved over time. The real modern iterations, like shown in the 2000s and beyond, I didn't really get past the 90s as far as the modern adaptations of the characters. I didn't really care for. I really don't care for stylized that stylized look, of some of them. It just looks awful. It looks so bad. Like Scooby-Doo should not look like Family Guy. I don't care how popular that animation is. It just shouldn't look like that. And then they also treat. There was a version I saw where it was completely modern animation. And they put the characters in the same dress. I don't mind that. I actually kind of like that they stay in the same clothes as they did in 1969. But what I didn't care for was the modern animation with how they did their faces and the eyes. So for instance, um, Fred and Daphne and Shaggy, um, every one of the characters besides Scooby-Doo has black dots for their eyes. But they were on a really strict budget, so they didn't fill in those eyes like with the white part of the eyes. It was just the black dots, and then the skin tone of their skin color was part of the eyes. Only Scooby-Doo in the original version had the white part of his eyes. So the modern that looks okay, because it was the animation budget was really limited back then. But for a modern setting where you do have that capacity to draw the whites and color in the whites of someone's eyes, and you don't do that, that looks uncanny to me. That just doesn't really work that well. What was the draw of the Scooby-Doo cartoons for you as a child before you understood musical prowess? Well, I would say I grew up with some Hanna-Barbera. I wish I grew up with more, like Space Ghost, the original Johnny Quest. I really only grew up with Scooby-Doo, Flintstones, and Jetsons. And to be honest, I can't really even remember the soundtrack of the Flintstones and the Jetsons. I remember the theme song, the two theme songs, but I don't remember the score. I don't remember it being a very active score, but I'd have to hear it to remember. So I didn't really grow up with too much Hanna-Barbera. What I was really inspired by, and this was true of Scooby-Doo, was the active score of things like Tom and Jerry. Where you compose, like for a composer to compose a 4 to 6 minute cartoon of orchestral music composed and recorded every week, that is huge. Think about 4 to 5 minutes of heavy orchestra music that's supposed to complement what's happening between the antics of Tom and Jerry. And you compose orchestral music of that magnitude every week, 4 to 5 minutes of music every week, and get it recorded. That is insane. I never appreciated that as a kid because I just didn't know how composition worked. I didn't know how long it would take to compose and record. And so I was really heavily inspired, or at least maybe not inspired, but definitely influenced a lot by the Warner Brothers soundtracks as well, with Bugs Bunny and all of that, and especially Tom and Jerry. And Scooby-Doo was definitely one of them. I was actually I posted on my Twitter today something like, I realize now that tritones, I realize why tritones and whole tones never sounded dissonant to me. They're kind of dissonant, kind of exotic sounds, in the Western way of music writing or compositional style. Those are supposed to be relatively dissonant notes and pitches and relationships, but they never felt totally dissonant to me. And I think it's because of watching these cartoons whose composers had incredible influence and style from the old classic films of the 1930s and the 1940s. Pretty interesting there. So I guess people would have different opinions about this. So Jigwa says, I never saw the live action versions. I assume they didn't do the original justice at all. Actually, the Prof and I were talking about that last night. I think he liked at least the first one. I never liked those. I didn't care for the live action. And it wasn't, he and I agreed that it wasn't to bolster the franchise. The franchise was doing fine on its own. I just like the characters in their cartoon versions so much better. I can't remember when the first one was released. I think it was in the 90s though. And Scooby-Doo CGI just looks weird to me. Even if it's good CGI now that we have, it just looks weird. Like cartoon CGI for Scooby-Doo just it doesn't look right to me. But that could just be a preference. Now the live action, the one reason why I didn't like it, now again, it's not just live action, you're telling a story for the length of 90 minutes or longer for a theatrical release of the film. So obviously you need a main plot and you need friction and you need conflict. But I think the premise of that, if I remember correctly, was the gang split up because they fought over something. They were kind of tired of solving mysteries and they broke up and stuff like that. And then there was this conflict and then they worked together. And I didn't like the supernatural element also of the live action, but to me, the gang is together. You know, they're always together. They're always going to be best friends in my book because they shared all those mysteries together. So yeah, so with the live action that runs 90 minutes or longer, obviously you have to have conflict between the characters, but a full-on breakup, like I'm never talking to you again, it just didn't sit well with me as a kid. So I didn't prefer it myself, and I don't think I saw the subsequent live action, but I heard it didn't do very well. I heard the first one was popular, but the ones following didn't do so well. Oh yeah, why didn't I recognize that at first? It's red herring. It's a reference from a pup named Scooby-Doo. That is a version I did enjoy as a kid. I really did enjoy that cartoon as a kid. I thought that was just so funny. Like obviously they're not the same as the high school version. There was something about the comedy I just remember really liking as a kid. I'd have to like go back to it to see if it holds up, you know, in my 30s. But I did remember enjoying that a lot as a kid. So Scooby-Doo show. So the original Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? The Scooby-Doo show, pup named Scooby-Doo. I don't know if this is a shared opinion. I never liked Scrappy-Doo. Not as a kid, not now. And the reason was like my sister and I, even though we still had the kid mindset, like we had the intellectual capacity as a kid, you know, being kids, we were still pragmatic as kids. So we really both she and I never liked Scrappy-Doo because he always acted tough, but it was always Shaggy and Scooby saving him. So he still thought he was like top dog, like me and my Uncle Scooby, we're going to take you out. And he was ignorant that his uncle was scared to death, which was kind of annoying. Right, Uncle Scooby? And then the second is like, every predicament he thought he was handling the situation. And I kind of like, I always wanted Scooby, not in an unheroic way, but I always wanted Scooby or Shaggy not to be available, you know, for when Scrappy saw a monster. So he would get his due and say, "Oh, I am a little dog after all that doesn't have this magical superpower and I'm so tough," and stuff like that. I kind of wanted, you know, his name is Scrappy, but he never got in a scrap. He always put that was probably the meaning of his name actually. He always put his uncle in a bind, like in a scrap. Or Shaggy too. And so I didn't really have much tolerance for Scrappy-Doo. Now, I think I did watch the episodes, only because I like Shaggy and Scooby. And I think there was one version where Daphne also was in those episodes. Velma and Fred weren't in those episodes. I think they made guest appearances, if I can remember correctly. But Daphne, you know, as a little girl, I love Daphne. I like looking at Daphne. So she definitely softened the episode for me. If she wasn't there as a kid, I probably would not have put up with the Scrappy-Doo versions. I just did not care for that character at all. Like, Scrappy-Doo in the Scooby-Doo universe is the same as Ray Palpatine. just he's not a likable character, at least to me. I know some people like him, but I didn't care for him at all. Oh, movies, yes. Yes. I'm skipping down just a little bit, but old school Scoob, 13 Ghosts, Where Are You, and Scooby movies. I don't think I ever saw the 13 Ghosts, I did see the versions I also liked were, the Scooby movies with the celebrity guests, like Don Knotts and Phyllis Diller and, Cass Elliot, Globetrotters, Sonny and Cher. Who else? Who else guessed? Oh, Addams Family. That was a fun one. That was a real fun one. Um, Josie and the Pussycats. That was also fun. So I watched the old movies where they team up with the different celebrity guests. That was a lot of fun. Now the movies, like the more modern movies of the 90s, they're good stories. They are good stories. I know that they're enjoyable. I have a very different opinion about Scooby-Doo. This is just my preference. I don't know why I never picked up on the supernatural with Scooby-Doo. I never cared for the actual paranormal of Scooby-Doo, which doesn't make sense because it's, we see the supernatural and then we see it's a hoax. It's a villain behind a mask. But I always thought that was the appeal. I guess it's the mystery part. When it's, you could have the mystery in the paranormal, but it just, sometimes those movies of the 90s, it was like, oh, this is a scary zombie with some scary cat people and stuff like that. And it's not really a mystery. So I think when they introduced the speculative, there were some mystery elements to it. Now that I think about it, there's like a mystery alien. There's some mystery in the Alien film, if I remember correctly, but it wasn't finding clues. It was like Velma saying, "Oh, you've got dirt on your shoes. Why?" or something like that. I'm not saying the original cartoon had a really good mystery. There were just some items here and there to pick up on clues. I feel like the mysteries could have been even written a little bit better, but it's a kid's cartoon. But I don't know. There was something about introducing the supernatural that took away from the actual mystery. It was like, oh no, now we got to solve this paranormal crisis. So I wouldn't say the movies are bad. I just didn't prefer them because I like the man behind the mask. That's my favorite, and it can be really scary. But I love the villain. There's something about a person trying to cover up something and being scary about it that I find a lot more appealing. Oh yes, Batman and Robin. That's right. 10. Team Ghost says, we love Vincent Van Ghost. He reminds us of Doctor Strange. They're both modeled after Price. That's right. But I never saw that version. Yeah, I think the prof has seen that version. See, Team Ghost says, I love Scrappy. He showed leadership in the 13 Ghosts. It's sad James Gunn ruined him. I would love Scrappy to get his own team influenced by his Mystery Inc. Idols. I guess. His first introduction, though, I didn't care for. I did see those films too, Wolf 10. Yeah, I remember Ghoul School and Reluctant Wolf. Yeah, I actually did. I enjoyed those for what they were. And yeah, that is the supernatural, like the Ghoul School. Actually, yeah, both of them dealt with spells, magical spells, and magical creatures and stuff like that. I think there is a place for that. I did enjoy those films when I was a kid. I do remember that. I just if it had to continue, if the franchise had to continue, I would vote still have it be a mysterious hoax. Yeah, the Hex Girls. I was talking about that with the prof last night. It's like, I'll have to listen to that song. I'm a Christian, so I don't even like the word hex. But yeah, I remember the Hex Girls. Yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting enough. Oh, first movie was 2000. Yeah, that was the Zombie Island. I was freaky. I was eating my first viewing of that film. I was eating dinner with my grandparents, and I think I like left the dining room while it was playing, and I felt like my one of my grandparents said, "It's not that scary," or something like that. I was freaked out, where they fall into a pit, which I think is supposed to be kind of like a grave of some kind, maybe an open grave, and they pull a vine, and then there's like the skeletal hand that's kind of coming out of the ground, and then they keep pulling it, and then all these bones fall, and then the sky gets luminous, and the zombie comes. I mean, I think it's kind of sweet that the zombies were the good guys after all, but I remember that first zombie waking up is like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared. And it's like, I'm sure they were really scared, like Shaggy and Scooby. Like that's the thing is like Scooby and Shaggy are always scared, but it's like you kind of wonder, especially as a kid, it's like, well, guys, you run into this all the time. Surely you know that these are just villains behind masks. So I guess, Scooby and Shaggy were really superstitious too. They believed. That's the thing, is they believed the horrors around them. Yeah, I never saw those cartoons. What's New Scooby-Doo and Scooby-Doo Mystery Inc. I never saw those. Um, let me see Scooby-Doo Mystery Inc. I know the Scooby-Doo. What's New Scooby-Doo? Scooby-Doo Mystery Inc. I want to see what the animation looks like there. Let's see images. Yeah, I think this is the one I was thinking of, where it's the modern. It's the modern version, but they're using kind of their skin tone. Oh, I see that I see that Shaggy's eyes have the whites in them, but Daphne and Fred don't. It looks okay. Yeah, I I think it can work. I do what I do like that they did was they kept the same attire, the same dress. You got to keep that attire. You don't need to modernize. I love the charm of how they dressed back then. So I'm glad they did. And it still works in like a modern setting. Right. We've got about an hour and 15. Well, Melissa has her opinions about Scrappy. I could just not care for the character. Doesn't matter how much of a leader he looks in the Reluctant Werewolf or whatever that film was. So anyway, I think that's it, guys. That's all I had to say about that. What is on the dock? Oh, Dr. Wisen. Like Zoinks? Yeah. Oh, really funny thing, a little fun fact about me. So, we know that the original voice cast for Shaggy was Casey Kasem. As a little girl, I thought Casey was a girl because Casey can be a girl's name. And so I remember as a kid telling different people, like, guys, did you know that Shaggy was voiced by a girl? And then like later down the road, where Casey Kasem is, I think he passed away from something terminal or something. And I'm like, oh, Casey, he's a man. Well, that makes sense. Like this was like 20 years later. It's like I've been telling people that Shaggy was voiced by a girl. Didn't seem to make sense at the time, but I said it because I thought Casey was a girl's name in that way. So, but that's a fun fact about Sound Engraver. telling people lies. Well, I just didn't know. It's like, yeah, Shaggy sound a girl voiced Shaggy. Kind of blew my mind for a long time. Oh, Professor Geek is asking, any other Archie's Weird Mystery fans? Which we might spend a few times, spend a few episodes for this Halloween watching that. Actually, this Halloween, I think the Prof and I, when we have our late night together, we'll be going between Archie's Weird Mysteries and also the Scooby-Doo mysteries. It's just great. It's definitely that feeling. It's just an opinion, Melissa. You can say how much you like Scrappy. It's my channel. I don't prefer Scrappy, so yeah. So Dr. Y says the only original voice cast who's still around is Frank Welker, the voice of Fred. Can you imagine being a teenager for over 50 years? Yeah, I know. The name escapes me for who was doing us. Wait, no, I thought Frank Welker was the voice of Scooby-Doo. He started out as Fred, I think. No. Who's the voice of Scooby-Doo? He's still active. Yeah. I thought he was the active one. I thought it was Frank Welker who did Scooby-Doo all these years. But I think he started out as Freddie Jones. So anyway, what were you talking about? So hopefully you guys have a nice Halloween this Halloween weekend. Are you guys dressing up as anything? Are you guys doing anything fun? Prof and I are just homebodies. We'll have Alyssa this weekend anyway, so we'll be staying and snuggling up to some Archie's Weird Mysteries and also some Scooby-Doo classic episodes. But what is on the dock for me? So this week, a couple things that kind of tie in together. I should be releasing my single track Bradbury Lane within the next 2 or 3 days. I'd like to release it in October because, of course, as I've said before, Ray Bradbury is our beloved American writer, but we tend to associate the month of October with him, so I thought it was just really fitting to release it. So I should be good. I got the mix back today, and it sounds great. And then my engineer, he emailed me. I was about to email him back saying, this is wonderful, this is perfect, but I didn't read his email. He says, I think this is it, but I can make it cleaner. So I'm like, I'm not fighting that. So if he wants to continue working for another day or so, I'm fine with that. I told him one last thing. I'm like, hey, you can do to improve. I can only hear one thing that needs improving. He's like, oh, okay, I'll do that. And I'll get rid of some low end and it should sound pretty good. So we'll have that released in the next, I would like definitely by Thursday, because this Thursday on the Professor Geek channel, we are also doing the last installment of From the Dust Return by Ray Bradbury. It's been a joy just to read and listen with these kind of short stories and all of that. But that will be the final installment of his book study there before the prof goes back to the Star Wars EU. And so I'd like to actually kind of tie my single track with that last installment, even see if we can get it on his video if that's possible. But so that's that. So I have a single track coming your way. I've enjoyed it. It's been a few months of working on that. That's just I'm ready to move on actually. But I have enjoyed the kind of the mysterious sci-fi speculative beauty of that track. It's supposed to be kind of mysterious and magical in its own way, because that's the month of October, really, the mysterious and the magical. So that's kind of the specialness of Halloween for sure. So no costumes or no plans for you guys on Halloween? You guys are just gonna stay? It's official. Melissa loves Scrappy. We got to make this as clear as possible. So let's see. Dr. Y says, my brother and I are Scooby-Doo fanboys. I can recite the opening lines from the first episode. Oh, from the first episode. I probably could too. I'd have to look. No, Scrappy doesn't need a redemption for being annoying. You could be obnoxious. You don't need to be redeemed for being obnoxious. Oh, that late? Frank Welker took over Scooby-Doo in 2002 and 3. Oh, I thought it was much more. Thanks for clarifying that. Oh, he also did Bronx for Gargoyles? Cool. That actually, now that you mention that, that does sound familiar. His name has floated around. I love vocal talent. It's great. So okay, well, all right. Well, keep your names private. That's fine. But I'll, you're telling me how much you love Scooby-Doo, so I just again, thanks for the warning. But I'll pick on people who want to put so much stuff on my chat. So especially stuff like I like say, hey, this is my preference. Well, no, this is my preference. So but anyway, I think that's it. All right, so Bradbury Lane, that's coming to you. Book study is Thursday. We actually do have a book study for Catholic Bible Geek for The Two Towers. I'm kind of behind on my reading, but I know the story anyway. That will be tomorrow night at 10 p.m. on Catholic Bible Geek channel. Bradbury from the Desert Return on Thursday, 10 p.m. Of course, with his humble host, Big Al, and his different avatars. And you guys have your live streams. I know Wolf 10, I think you're still doing your live streams Tuesdays and Thursdays as well. We've got Big Al with his rewatches as well as with Netter's Network. I still want to hear more from Dr. Y with his videos because they're so awesome and relaxing. Yeah, Wolf 10 says, I'm a werewolf for Halloween. We love you too, Melissa. Oh, see? Dang it. I'm in the habit. Okay. We love you too, Team Ghost Planet 3.1. Yeah, so anyway, I think I've said what I needed to say. I feel like there's something else I need to announce, but we're getting back into SuperCollider on the 1st of November, starting with the first week of November. I've just been really focused on getting Bradbury Lane out and some of my other stuff underway, but I actually have been binging on SuperCollider videos. I've just been reviewing the tutorials. I'm pretty much done with the, Eli Fieldsteel's tutorials of his beginner class, which is about 10 videos, roughly an hour long. It's just been really good to review SuperCollider. And so I will be experimenting more in SuperCollider as we go into November. Just kind of hang tight there. It's not quite, I'm not quite ready to do that. But then I'll go ahead and binge on his intermediate course. And that's going to be another 10 hours of video watching and all that. So SuperCollider is coming more in November, and I actually won't be releasing anything more after Bradbury Lane. I would really like to just home in on my craft. I really do want to get back into sound synthesis and SuperCollider with granular synthesis, FM synthesis, whatever the case is, with sound files, with generated sounds, with live signal processing. I have been doing MIDI protocol with SuperCollider, but at the end of the day, I feel like it could just compose a lot faster in Logic Pro. So I might not do MIDI protocol as much. I just don't know. It's easier for me, but it's also more time consuming. So anyway, I think Dr. Y has something. Yet WCR for Wolf 10. Sound Engraver, what a nervous night. We'll end it with this. What a nervous night for walking home from the movies. Oh, yay. Oh, that was yeah, that was oh, was that the first? Yeah, I just saw that before the stream. A night for a night. What a night for a night. What a nervous night for walking home from the movie Scooby-Doo. And all because you had to see Star, Dog Ranger of the Northwoods, like twice. Yeah, it's good stuff. All right. Yeah, I can. I feel you, Team Ghost. I know. It's we gotta have to, in a way, we have to mind our P's and Q's with this wonderful platform. I try not to get in trouble with this wonderful platform, simply because it's free advertisement for my music and my website. So, but I can understand. So, yeah, thanks for the warning. If you don't want us to say the name, I definitely understand. Anyway, I think that's it. Let me just go through the chat one more time. And I really enjoyed this. I hope it wasn't stormy for a long time. Hopefully it was just for a few minutes. I'm on the magical Ethernet cable, so it's pretty good. Pretty good. But I guess it was pretty spotty. Too bad about that thumbnail. But I guess you live and learn. All right. Well, thanks, guys. That was really fun talking about the Scooby-Doo soundtrack. So go watch your favorite Halloween stuff for this week. And I wish you guys a wonderful Halloween weekend. And keep it safe. As Fan Man would say, keep it safe and super. And I will catch you guys all later. Thanks. Have a good week. I'll catch you in the chat of other streams.